Well, thank you, Congressman Pittenger, and thank you, everyone, for coming today. We have an amazing group of panelists here with us today. I'm going to open up with some brief remarks, just explaining a little bit about human trafficking. I know some of you are aware of what human trafficking but I know some of you are not. So I really wanted to give an overview to set the stage for what this global epidemic really is. So as Congressman Pittenger said, I am the Chief Executive Officer of ATI. I'm also the chair of the Task Force on Human Trafficking here for PISF, and I'm very, very thankful again for this forum and for my fellow panelists to address this critical intersection between human trafficking and illicit finance. Human trafficking is said to be the second largest criminal enterprise on the planet right now, and what is really fueling this epidemic is actually greed, and that's what we're here actually to discuss here. Unlike drugs or weapon, a human being can be sold multiple times, and so for that reason, human beings are treated as a product and a commodity rather than a person. When most people hear the phrase human trafficking, they usually think of kidnapping. However, I am here to tell you that most often this actually is not the case. In fact, right here in the United States, 1 in 5 children will be approached by a trafficker before their 18th birthday. And that process usually happens through grooming and manipulation. It is not straight kidnapping off the street. I've talked to survivors of human trafficking from around the world and listened to their stories of how they became trapped and enslaved in a life that they never imagined. And globally, one of the most common types of human trafficking is one that few people think of, and that is actually forced marriage. This form of modern slavery is one of the most sinister and often overlooked types of trafficking. But recently, it has come into the forefront because of the crisis in Afghanistan and the sudden economic upheaval that has resulted in more young girls than ever being sold as brides. According to UNICEF, before COVID-19, more than 100 million girls were expected to be sold into marriage before their 18th birthday, and this number has actually increased by 10 million just as a result of the pandemic. Girls are being sold by their parents to make ends meet, some of them as young as 8 years old. The economic collapse that after the Taliban's takeover in August has forced already poor families to make incredibly desperate decisions. One of our own members, actually, of the PISF Task Force on Human Trafficking is a woman named Fawzia Kufi, and she was actually the Vice President of Parliament in Afghanistan before the takeover in August. She was recently nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021 because of her work, and she tried very hard to make it here today and was unable to, but she has asked me to read some remarks from her regarding this. So these are Ms. Kufi's remarks. The latest case of forced and child marriages in Afghanistan is a taste for whether we can come together as an international community to protect fundamental rights of women and girls, or let suffering become a normal standard of life for girls in Afghanistan. In the remote province of Baghdad, Afghanistan, a recent CNN report showed the face of a 9-year-old Parwana Malik sold to a 55-year-old man who avoided a reporter's questions as he dragged the girl to his car. If food could not be purchased soon, her dad said, Parwana's 2-year-old sister would be next. Parwana is not alone in this experience. In fact, tens of thousands of girls are married off each day, 1 every 2 seconds. Empowering girls and ending child marriage is also linked to greater economic security. According to the International Center for Research on Women and the World Bank, child marriage is estimated to cost economies at least 1.7% of their GDP. And that's the end of her remarks. I will go further and explain that according to the World Bank, ending the practice of child marriage would save billions of dollars annually, resulting in a global savings of more than $4 trillion by 2030. To state it plainly, the world cannot afford to allow child marriage to continue. Economic reasons alone are a compelling reason to place this priority on this critical intersection. Additionally, I just want to say, if you were at our forum in Budapest, you may recall one of the things that I shared is that human trafficking should be viewed not just as a humanitarian crisis, but also as a security issue, because it actually funds the very terrorists who make our world unstable and unsecure. You may recall I shared the story of Layla. She was a 12-year-old Yazidi girl in Iraq in 2014 when ISIS terrorists, they came and they actually kidnapped her, took her from her village. They separated the men from the boys, and then she was proceeded to take to basically into captivity, where she never saw the light of day for 2 years. She was sold every single day to men for sex, multiple times a day. And by the time she was 14, she was in such poor health that she was basically deemed no longer useful to ISIS. So they returned her to her parents. The funds from selling Layla and other girls like her were actually used to fuel ISIS terrorist operations, which threatened not only the stability of the Middle East, but potentially the world. And this is why human trafficking should be viewed as not only a humanitarian crisis, but a security issue, because the illicit funding behind human trafficking is fueling those who make our world unsafe. But there is actually good news on this. There is a bright spot. Last week, some of you may have seen news reports that the first member of ISIS was officially convicted for crimes against the Yazidis. On Tuesday of last week, an ISIS member was found guilty not only of genocide, but of human trafficking. Germany is to be applauded as one of the few countries to have pursued prosecution against ISIS members for crimes against the Yazidis. So human trafficking intersects many, many different sectors, and eradicating it across the globe will reap even more rewards than the ones I've mentioned. And before I wrap up here, I want to give you something very practical that all of you can do to get on board with this. Here at PISF, we've actually drafted a letter to the UN regarding this issue, and that we really want it to be the prioritization of human trafficking as the focus area for the UN General Assembly this September in 2022 in New York City. Human trafficking has never been the priority focus area of this largest assembly, and we really are pushing for that. So I'm going to read you a tiny portion of the letter. There are 10 original signatories on it, including Congressman Pittenger and MP Karen Bradley, who's here today. And I'm just going to read you a portion, but if you would like to sign this letter, you can reach out to the congressman or myself and add your name as well. Several factors have propelled this humanitarian crisis globally. More than 280 million migrants are among the individuals most vulnerable to the ravages of human trafficking, and the global migration crisis has increased the human trafficking crisis. Those forced to leave their homes, a record 80 million in 2020, are at particular risk. The COVID-19 pandemic has especially worsened the vulnerabilities of women and girls, who already account for 70% of detected trafficking victims. Generating the equivalent of $150 billion US globally annually, human trafficking is used to finance terrorist groups such as Boko Haram and brutal regimes such as the Taliban. It is also estimated that approximately 40% of deforestation is carried out by victims of modern slavery. The convergence of these factors has created a global humanitarian crisis of slavery, and there are currently more slaves at this time in history than at any other time. The crisis of human trafficking is intersecting many other crises, such as climate change, mass migration, and terrorism. And because of this, we strongly urge that the focus of UNGA in New York City this year be combating human trafficking and modern slavery. So with that, I'm going to end my portion of the remarks, but I want to encourage you all, if you would like to sign your name to this, like I said, to please reach out to Congressman Pittenger or myself, and we can add you as well. If you take nothing else away from the panelists and what you are going to hear today, we all want you to realize that there are policy changes that you can establish now that will combat this threat of modern slavery in your country. Thank you. So moving along, I really wanted to introduce my now dear friend Karen Bradley. She's a member of Parliament from the United Kingdom. She was also Secretary of State for Northern Ireland from 2018 to 2019. In 2014, she became the first Minister of Modern Slavery and Organized Crime, and she actually helped to bring about the Serious Crime Act to protect people in the UK from organized crime. She also helped secure the passage of the UK's Modern Slavery Act, which is the landmark piece of legislation in the UK that really criminalizes human trafficking and protects victims. She is currently the co-chair of the all-party parliamentary group on human trafficking and modern slavery, and she's the chair of the APPG on challenger banks and building societies. In addition to this, we're thrilled to have her here and as a member of our panelists and as a member of our task force. Thanks so much, Karen.